I was rinsing coffee cups after sunset when my neighbor, Bobby, stepped through my half-open back door with words I never saw coming. In the quiet hum of my kitchen, he said something that made my hands tremble and my heart remember its own courage. What followed wasn't drama or scandal. It was a slow, honest unraveling of two lives that had been living next door to each other, pretending we didn't need more. Before I begin, tell me where you're watching from. Which city are you in tonight? I'm Tiffany, 48, speaking to you from a little cul-de-sac that smells like cut grass and old lilacs after the rain. I want to see your city in the comments. Newark, Tampa, Tulsa, Portland. Let me know so I can wave back across the miles. The kitchen was the kind that carried my life in its drawers. Rubber bands and twist ties, a measuring spoon with the numbers worn off, a magnet shaped like a peach holding up my grandson's crayon rainbow. The July evening pressed warm against the windows. The air was heavy with the sweetness of dish soap and the last of the chili I'd simmered for myself. I'd left the back door cracked to let the heat out, and cicadas were practicing some slow, steady hymn that always made me feel less alone. I was thinking about the last decade the way you think about a road you didn't mean to take, a detour that became the route. Divorce papers had arrived 7 summers ago, signed and swollen with everything we lost. My daughter was grown and far away in Texas. My parents' house had become my own after they passed, and I'd taught myself to fix leaky faucets and unclog gutters because life kept asking, "Can you handle this?" And I kept answering, "I'll try." That's where I was, elbow deep in suds, when the door eased wider and Bobby's voice called soft, as if it might scare the silverware. "Tiffany, you got a minute?" He stood in the frame like a big question mark. Bobby, mid-50s, broad shoulders that had carried too many things for too many people, a sun-worn face that never learned to be cruel. He wore the same chambray shirt he wore when he helped me move my mother's piano, sleeves rolled, forearms freckled, a coil of care in the corners of his eyes. "You scared me," I said, setting a cup down too hard. Door was open. I should have locked it. "I knocked," he said, lifting his hand like proof. "Guess the cicadas swallowed it. I can come back." "No, it's fine," I said, suddenly aware that my hair was up with a pencil, and I was wearing the soft t-shirt with the faded Orioles logo I'd had since '99. "What's up?" He stepped inside, moving with that careful, respectful way of his, as if every floorboard carried a story he didn't want to interrupt. He smelled faintly of cedar and machine oil and the mint gum he always chewed to break himself from cigarettes. He took off his cap and turned it by the brim while his eyes scanned everything. My sink of dishes, the little radio whispering a baseball game, the ceramic rooster my mother thought was classy. "Do you have coffee?" he asked, abruptly, then reddened. I can make it. Or tea. Or nothing. I shouldn't have. Coffee's fine." I didn't know why my voice shook. "You can pour while I finish these." He moved behind me like a river finding its old bed. The kettle took its place on the burner and clicked when he turned the knob. We stood there, not quite touching, as the flame curled blue. I heard the smallest catch in his breath, and as if we were actors who'd done this scene 100 times, I handed him the tin of grounds without looking, and he took it. "Why are you here, Bobby?" I asked finally. He didn't answer right away. The kettle began its low moan. Steam gathered and trembled over the lip. He turned the burner lower with a gentle twist, the way you might soothe a crying child. "I heard you talking to yourself," he said at last, eyes not on me, but on the kettle. "Through the screen. You were saying something about being tired of lifting all the heavy things. And then you laughed at yourself and said, 'Well, too bad, Tiffany, no one's coming to do it for you.' And I could feel heat rise up my neck. I didn't know anyone could hear. 'I didn't mean to listen,' he said, 'but I've been listening for a long time anyway. Not the words. The The way you go quiet. The way you shoulder a ladder by yourself. The way you pull your trash cans in late because no one beats you to it. And I thought, tonight, I'm going to say the thing I should have said months ago. He turned toward me then, and I stopped washing without meaning to. The water kept running like a clumsy drummer in the background. Bobby's eyes were the soft brown of a creek bed, full of old coins and unsent letters. "You're not alone," he said. It wasn't a grand confession. Not the sort of thing a movie would make into an orchestra. But something inside me loosened the way a tight jar lid finally gives under the warm tap. My hands sank into the suds and found a spoon, and I'd washed it. And then I washed it again because I needed the repetition to keep from crying. That's a kind thing to say. I managed. But it's late. You scared me a little. "I know," he said. I thought of coming tomorrow with sunlight, but the words would turn to dust by morning. "I've got this." He reached into the pocket over his heart and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was creased so many times it looked like an old map. I wrote it down because I ramble when I care. "Bobby," I said, the name a small prayer. "What is going on?" He unfolded the paper and didn't look at it. "I lost my wife 3 winters ago. You know that. People brought casseroles and said, 'Time heals,' and then it didn't. I learned how to keep going, but it wasn't healing so much as hardening. Then you moved your mother's piano in April, and you played something that sounded like the house remembering its own childhood, and I thought, well, there it is. Softness still lives next door." The radio crackled with a play I didn't catch. The kettle gave a single, impatient cough. Outside, a car rolled by with music like an old secret. "I don't know how to do this," he said. "I don't want to make you uncomfortable. I don't have an ask, not tonight. I just want to say this out loud so that if you need a heavy thing carried or a light burned or someone to be on your side in the quiet hours, I'm here. Not because I pity you, because I see you. The simplest things are the hardest to bear." I turned off the faucet before the sink betrayed me by spilling over, and I dried my hands on a towel that had lemon slices printed on it. Then I faced him, my back to the sink, which meant I could feel its cool porcelain against my hips like a boundary and a brace. "Why now?" I asked. "Because I saw you coming up the driveway with that bag of soil over your shoulder this afternoon, and I thought that's the exact weight I should have carried. And because I heard you humming just now, and it sounded lonely. And because I'm afraid that if I keep waiting for the perfect moment, the moment will pass me by and I'll end up another man who kept good words in his pocket until they turned into lint. Something in me wanted to make a joke, to break the tension with a line about lint and pockets, and how men in this neighborhood are born with utility belts. But the truth is, the air felt like a bell had been struck, and we were both waiting for the ring to fade. So I didn't joke. I walked past him to the stove, and I turned the flame off entirely, and I poured 2 mugs of coffee, mine first, then his, because that felt like neutrality and respect at the same time. "Sugar?" I asked. "Please." "Milk." "Whatever you're having." I handed him the mug, and his fingers lifted the heat as if it could warn or bless. He didn't reach for me, didn't crowd me, didn't do all the things the world tells women to brace against. He stood and waited until I was ready to move closer, which I did, like a cautious boat leaving the dock, because the tide was kind. "You said you had words," I said. "Those were already plenty." "There's one more," he said, voice low. "May I tell you that I like who you are without you thinking I want to take something? Because I don't. I want to offer." Offer. The word floated between us, full of clean promise, like a chair pulled out at the table. "What exactly are you offering, Bobby?" "Time," he said. "Steady hands. The kind that don't keep a clock in the middle of a conversation. A ride if you don't feel like driving at night. Humor when the sink won't stop dripping. And if it doesn't scare you off, company. The kind you can send home early or ask to stay a little longer, and either way, It's okay." He sipped. I sipped. Our breaths misted the air between the mugs, small clouds that broke and mended themselves. "I didn't expect your words," I said, and heard the truth in my own voice. I thought I'd finish the dishes, fold some towels, and go to bed in a house that always sounds too big after 10 p.m. I didn't think anyone saw me well enough to say any of this. "I see the light under your back door every night at 11, he said, smiling in a way that didn't pry. "I figured either you're writing novels or your dishwasher has opinions." "Both," I said and laughed, and the laugh startled me because it made the room bigger. "Bobby, I don't know what I'm ready for, but I know what I miss. I miss sitting with someone and not talking about anything grand. I miss the kind of silence that feels shared." He set his mug down. "We could start there. Shared silence. No signatures." We sat across from each other at my small square table, the one with a scorch mark hidden under the placemat, because life will always get hot where it matters. He told me about the carburetor he'd been rebuilding for a kid down the street, and how the kid looked at his hands like they were magic. I told him about the spider plant that had started throwing babies over the cupboard edge, and how I couldn't bring myself to cut them loose just yet. He asked permission with his eyes every time he wanted to ask a tender question, and I nodded when I could answer honestly, and shook my head when the honest answer was not yet. At some point his hand came to rest on the table, palm up, a quiet invitation with no expiration date attached. Not a demand, not a test, just a place to land if I needed one. I thought of how rare it feels, at our age, to be offered anything without the weight of the past trying to pull it apart. "May I?" I asked, because consent is also a gift to the giver. "You may," he said, and he said it with a softness usually reserved for church and newborns. I placed my hand in his palm and had that odd electric sensation of remembering something I hadn't known I'd forgotten. The scale of my own hand, the warmth of another's, the precise distance between two people bridged without debt. His thumb didn't stroke my skin. His fingers didn't tighten to claim. He simply held, the way you might hold a promise you're willing to keep even if no one ever calls it due. "Why do men wait so long to say simple things?" I asked, half to him, half to the ceiling that had heard me argue with bills and tiredness. "Because we're afraid of being simple," he said. "We think a grand gesture is what earns us a place. But I lost everything grand the night I lost her. Since then, I've learned the beauty of a chair that doesn't wobble and a sentence that doesn't rush." We sat like that until the coffee cooled and the cicadas gave the evening back to the crickets. Outside, a breeze wandered in and lifted the thin curtain beside the sink as if to peek at us, and then sigh in relief. I felt something unclench, not a door flying open, but a latch finding its rightful position. "I can't promise you anything beyond tonight," I said, "but I can promise that your words landed where they were supposed to, and that if you're willing to be patient with me, I'm willing to learn what it means to let someone help without losing myself." He nodded. "Then I'll start by changing that porch light for you tomorrow. It keeps flickering. Been meaning to say." "I know," I smiled. "I've been pretending it was moody." "I'll be careful on the ladder," he said, and then added after a beat, "May I give you a hug before I go? A neighborly one, the kind we can both breathe through." I realized I'd already been breathing easier. "Yes, you may." We stood. He didn't rush me. When I stepped in, he wrapped his arms around me as if they were a porch swing, and I was a person who remembered how to sit still. No swaying, no secret choreography, just a steady human hold. My cheek found the fabric of his shirt. His breath moved slow and visible against my hair. I closed my eyes and felt, for the first time in a long time, that the house and I were both occupied. When we let go, it wasn't because anything broke. It was because we'd both learned to respect the delicate architecture of a moment and not load it down with more than it could carry. He picked up his cap, and I walked him to the back door where the night air waited like a cool cloth. "Thank you for saying it," I told him. "You're not alone either, you know." He tipped the cap without putting it on, a small punctuation mark, a period where a question used to be. "See you tomorrow, Tiffany. Sleep well." "Good night, Bobby." He left, and I stood in the quiet. The kitchen clock clicked like a patient metronome. I turned off the radio. I'd washed the last cup by hand, just for the feel of it, and set it upside down to dry, and for once the hollow sound it made against the rack didn't echo. The house felt smaller, the good kind of smaller, like a sweater that fits after you've been swimming in one too big. I don't know what tomorrow will ask of us, but I know this. Tonight, a door that had been open for air opened for something else, something steadier, kinder, and absolutely ours to decide. And all it took was a neighbor walking in, and words I didn't expect, landing exactly where they needed to. The morning after Bobby's words, I woke to the sound of my own house settling. You know that creak in the floorboards when the temperature shifts, the sigh of wood that's older than you are. It felt like the house itself had heard everything the night before and wanted to remind me it was still standing. I brewed coffee, not in the hurried way of someone rushing out, but carefully, like I was practicing a ritual. The steam rose, and for the first time in years, I didn't sip it alone with the heaviness of silence pressing on me. His words had stayed, curling into the corners of the kitchen like sunlight you didn't close the curtains against. At around 9, I saw him out front, leaning against the ladder he brought. Bobby was there with a toolbox and a grin that was part sheepish, part steady, like a man who knew promises were only as good as the first thing you fixed with them. He didn't knock on the door this time. Instead, he tipped his cap toward the window, as if to say, "Morning, neighbor. I'm here if you're still willing." I stepped outside, coffee in hand, robe tied too loosely, and felt suddenly younger and older all at once. "You came early," I said. He smiled. Porch light kept me up, thinking about it. He set the ladder in place with careful hands. I watched him climb, slow, deliberate, not reckless. The sky behind him was a pale blue stretched thin over the world, and I thought about how long it had been since I let anyone climb a ladder for me, since I'd allowed someone to carry the weight without me insisting I could do it alone. When the bulb twisted free and he tested the new one, the light blinked on even in the morning sun. It wasn't necessary, but it was proof. He came down the ladder, wiped his palms on his jeans, and looked at me like he wasn't sure if he should stay or go. "Coffee's hot," I said, "if you've got time." He followed me in, and just like the night before, his presence filled the room without crowding it. He sat at my table, the one with the scorch mark still hidden, and he held the mug I'd offered him as if it wasn't just coffee but an invitation. We talked about ordinary things first, the neighbor's roses, the way the mailman always forgets which side of the street gets delivered first, the sound of rain on aluminum gutters. But underneath, something steadier hummed. At one point, he leaned back, mug resting in both hands, and said, "You looked lighter when you opened the door this morning, like you didn't have to carry everything yourself." I wanted to argue, to say it was just the road or the coffee or the way sunlight hit my hair, but I didn't. Instead, I admitted, it feels different, like I've been walking with a stone in my shoe for years, and suddenly it's not there. Your words last night, they stayed. He nodded, quiet. I meant every one. There was a pause then, not awkward, just wide, like a field waiting to be crossed. I thought about the years behind us, his grief, my solitude, the way we passed each other in the driveway with waves and polite smiles, both of us convincing ourselves that kindness was enough. And then I thought about the years ahead, still blank, still readable. "Bobby," I said softly, "I don't know what this is, or what it might become. But I know I want to find out without rushing, without breaking what's gentle about it.